There, we're going to go ahead and get started. Ricky, we're going live.
Recording in progress.
Get ready, get ready, get ready. It's Let's Talk Business with Sherryl Cusseaux. This is the second hour of our show, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Shanae Davis.
Hey, hey, happy Mental Health Awareness Month.
It is, and we have two amazing therapists. I am going to be so together after this show. You all will not be able to touch me today. I will just be on point. But listen, this is a show that we're going to talk about the who, the what, the when, the where, and the how. In this case of these professionals. Also, mental health awareness. Dr. Davis has just been phenomenal with us and our show and bringing on the best experts to help us live our best lives. I guess that's why her clinic is called Your Best You. But that being said, this is what we want to do. We're going to introduce our guests, but before that, I really want to hear the ladies talk about the women in their life, specifically moms, or like a mom. You decide, because Mother's Day is coming up this weekend. So for those who are joining us live on our Facebook page, if you're just tuning in, thank you so much. We are live on In Touch News. We are live on Let's Talk Business with Sherryl Cusseaux. I'm not sure if our guests went live, but you know you can also pick the show up on YouTube. And of course, In Touch Radio. So we're global. We're all over. Here's a perfect opportunity to like and share, because this is something you want your family, every family member, to hear what our specialists have to say today. My mom, just the best mom in the world. She has made her heavenly transition, but she made such an impact on my life. She blessed us with 8 siblings, 4 girls and 4 boys. And that's just a beautiful thing. I think we pretty much just took all she had out of her life. But to Frances, Lois, Brooks, Jennings, she's resting in heaven. Love you, Mom. Happy Heavenly Mother's Day. Dr. Davis?
Yes, happy Mother's Day to my mom, Dale Allen in Columbus, Georgia. And I'm just so grateful to my mom. And I'm praying for a speedy recovery. She just had her hip surgery, her other hip. She had a procedure done after falling near the Grand Canyon a couple of years ago. So
I remember that.
Yeah. So with maturity comes a little bit of bumps and bruises, but cheers to my mom.
Yes. And we're going to introduce our guests, but before they became these professional women that they are today, let's find out a little bit about their moms. And we're going to just segue over to Dr. Dominique Blanchette.
Hey everyone, happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. Special shout out to my mom, Susan Andrews, all the way in Sacramento, California right now. A huge reason why I even pursued a career in mental health to begin with. So special shout out to you, Mom. I love you. And also I will give a shout out to my moms here in the Tampa Bay area, my aunts and my grandma, Sybil K. Andrews, Nancy Andrews, Gloria Andrews, my cousin Allison Wells. So a special shout out to the Andrews family. I love you all. So happy to be here with you all beautiful ladies today. So thank you for having me.
That's just beautiful. And we're going to swing right over to you. I love this. And this is how I'm just going to introduce her for right now. Dr. Auntie, tell us about your mom.
Well, my mother, Emma Mae Wiggins, was as sweet as a Georgia peach, and she was a Georgia peach. She made her transition in 1989. So I had been in my adult life, most of my life, without a mother, but there have been wonderful women who've taken me under their wings along the way, and I just appreciate them so much. My mother, I believe, was the sweetest woman on earth. And she, like all mothers, I think are just heavenly treasures and heavenly gifts. What will we do without them? So thank you, not just to my mom and those who've helped me, but to all those mothers who are watching today. God bless you.
All right, so you heard it from three of the doctors in the house today, and I'm going to say happy Mother's Day to all of you mothers and in the motherly role that God has blessed you to serve in, to be in. We are here today because of them, so they're very, very special. Now, this is what's going to help me because we have these experts on the show today. You heard Dr. Auntie talk, both our moms have transitioned, and you wonder, how do you get through? How do we get through each day? And it changes from day to day and from year to year. Again, I'm so looking forward to hearing what these amazing women are going to talk to us about today. But I'm going to take this opportunity to first, let's tackle our subject with our own Dr. Shanae Davis, and then we're going to come back and introduce these phenomenal professionals. Dr. Davis?
Absolutely. Our hot topic today is mindfully forward, and today's guest will some insight on ways to think of mental health in a forward way. How about thinking of mental health as a solution, a preventive approach to stress, anxiety, and effective coping? So Sherryl, first tell us about these powerhouse guests, and we will get them to answer the most important question. We know that mental health is important, but why? And we want them to give it to us straight. Why is mental health important? Soon after the information.
Mental health important? Well, they're the experts. And listen, let me just shout out to Tampa Bay, one of the best cities there is to live in this world. As I was speaking with Dr. Blanchett, this is what I learned. Such a beautiful face. And she mentioned that some of her relatives went to school with me. Well, listen, I know the whole family. So shout out, hey, Sybil K, if you're watching. And there were 8 of us, but half of us, we could actually match up with the Andrews family. And that's both sides of the Andrews family. And so I appreciate hearing that and finding out that you're coming back here. Sybil K, Susan, Nancy K. Then there was Lillian. Oh my gosh. Michelle is who I was thinking of earlier. And it's just a beautiful thing. And of course, each one of my siblings could attach to you. So I love hearing that. I'm looking forward to actually meeting you guys in person, but we'll go ahead and start with Dominique. Welcome to the Tampa Bay area. It's just a city that you're going to fall in love with. One of the things in reading your bio is, and nobody can explain what you've done and how this particular trajectory of your life got started. You gave your mom a shout out, and we'd love to hear more about that. But listen, currently, your words, I'm expanding the breadth of my expertise in healing practices by seeking out learning experiences involving ancestral forms of healing and energy work, such as, and I'm waiting to hear what this is going to be all about, Reiki, to incorporate into everyday practices, R-E-I-K-I, and she'll elaborate on that in just a little bit. But this gal, Cali born, raised, but now called Florida home, outside of work. She loves a great documentary, all things Kindle reading, brunch vibes. Yeah, one of Dr. Davis's favorite, and spending time with family and friends and her partner and her too. Okay, I'll let you talk about Henry and Rose when we come back. But lastly, I'm grateful as a Black female psychologist to work in a space like the BGD where I am constantly reminded of my value. I seek to remind you of that as well in our work together. Your joy, dreams, purpose matter. So less pouring from an empty cup and more claiming the life you deserve. If you're still reading this, I love it. I can wait to connect with you. So she's connecting with us today. You can tell us a little bit about where you studied and where you got your expertise from. But Dr. Dominique Blanchett, welcome to Let's Talk Business.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sherryl. I appreciate that intro. I'm Dr. Dom, and currently I'm a licensed psychologist at the Black Girl Doctor, which is a niche virtual therapy practice originally based in California, but we are completely virtual. So we have providers in different states. I'm licensed in Florida and in New York currently. And so we provide a myriad of services, right? So we do individual therapy, group therapy, we do private and organizational coaching. And we also do organizational wellness assessments, workshops for organizations that are interested in helping to pour into and bolster their Black communities. So I am an HBCU graduate, originally Hampton University, shout out to Hampton. I actually have a master's in business psychology as well as a doctorate in clinical psychology. And I did a lot of my early training in serious mental illness, so a lot of inpatient work and things like that. But now that I'm in private practice, we're working exclusively with Black folks, which is something that I knew that I wanted to do. And I am so grateful to be able to do that early in my career. We work with high achieving professional people, right? So the people who are booked and busy and feel like they don't have time to pour into themselves. As you read in my bio, Ms. Sherryl, that is my goal, is to encourage folks who look like me to, and us, to take the time, to make the time to pour into their mental health, because that is going to bolster every other aspect of their life, I believe. And to speak specifically to what you mentioned about the Reiki piece, and I'm not sure if you want us to get into that a little later.
Let's wait on it.
Let's let you get it.
Okay.
But Ricky, would you put that picture back up of the Black girl doctors? Dr. Davis, look at this beautiful picture.
I see it. I see it. I see it.
I'm just stuck right there.
Yes, shout out to BGD. We are
Yes.
all there. And also hiring. So I'm gonna put that pin out there. We're hiring in all 50 states. So you are a licensed psychologist and are looking to work in private practice virtually.
I love that.
Right.
We're going to come back and hear more about that. Thank you so much.
Sure.
What stuck with me is booked and busy. You got both. You got me right there. Booked and busy. I love it, love it, love it. Thank you. And now, oh, I cannot wait for her to tell us where this name came from. Love it, love it, love it. Now you heard from, we said Dr. Dominique Blanchette, but she's Dr. Dom. Sometimes she goes by Dr. Dominique. Are you guys ready for this? We have Dr. Auntie. Oh my God, listen to this. When you get to know Dr. Deborah Steck, you realize she loves people, laughing, growing, and thinking it can be done, period. She grew up in a humble family in Detroit, Michigan, who loved gatherings in Grandpa's kitchen and telling stories. Through family encouragement, she attended Oakwood University, Wayne State University, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about that and where she got the rest of her expertise from. How about this, Dr. Dom and Andrews University? Dr. Auntie founded her current practice, Need to Talk LLC. She's going to share a little more with us about that. But basically, she provides counseling to various individuals and entities. One of the things she is especially proud of is Lunchapy.
Lunchapy.
Lunchapy, because I was like, is this lunch and being happy at lunch?
And
That's
there.
And that is a perfect point, perfect place for me to stop. Welcome to the show, Dr. Auntie, or AKA Dr. Real Name, Deborah Spence. Tell us a little bit about who you are and where did Dr. Auntie is trademarked.
Wonderful. Every time you say AKA, I think it's something else. You just notice I'm wearing green. But, you know, I grew up in Detroit, and as it says, as you said, a very, very humble beginnings, but a very, very close family, super intimate, a grandfather who would just have you on the floor in stitches, and four uncles who would do the same. And Grandpa's kitchen is where I got my self-esteem, because I would make a statement so confidently. And then I would say, right, Gramps, and he would say, right. He would say right to almost everything I said, while my mother wanted to go upside his head. I was looking at him with a side eye. So, it was very humble, but I had an aunt that I thought was by marriage, that I thought was extremely classy. And I wanted to know where she went to school. And she just kind of blew me off. And I wasn't going to be blown off, not even as a kid. And so she told me, and I talked with my parents and they said, yeah, you could go. So I went away to boarding school 9 through 12. And, I'd say that that's probably one of the reasons that I have been very diverse in my practice. But after 4 years of boarding school, I wanted some soul, and I had a need for the hood and to be around people who looked like me, more people who look like me. So I did a year in the inner city, and then I went away to Oakwood University, which is the HBCU in Huntsville, Alabama. After there, I transitioned to Wayne State University, where I did a Bachelor's of Science in Ed and a minor in special ed. And then to Andrews University, where I did a master's in speech and language pathology. It wasn't enough. And I can tell you later why it wasn't enough.
Yes.
But then I progressed I went back to school to study counseling psychology. And I transitioned to a PhD in leadership and philosophy with a concentration in counseling psychology. At the same time that I did that, I did a master's in counseling psychology. So I was doing 2 programs simultaneously at the same time. And so I think that with those experiences, it broadened my breadth and depth of not just counseling, but in life and leadership in general. I remember back in boarding school, I would sit up on a little love seat in the middle of the night and have secret talks with some of the girls. And, I was an officer in the girls club, but yeah, little secret talks. I didn't know that my path was being laid for me. And what prompted me to go back to school was I was in a high school working as a speech path. And there was a girl who ran into the office. There was a pack of girls who ran behind her and knocked her to the floor and started beating and stumping her.
Oh my goodness.
And the principal was out at a meeting. Everyone was stunned, but me and another secretary jumped in and started peeling these girls off of this child. And I went back to my office and I sat down and I wept. I didn't cry. I wept. And at that point, it was a pivotal moment in my life because I was always attracted to self-help, mental health. Even as a teen, I would find myself in that portion of a bookstore, empowerment.
Yes.
So I went back to school at that point. And I ended up doing a 12-state study on the phenomenon of woman-on-woman abuse and its relationship to gender profiles and the personal experiences of women, where I statistically prove that there is abuse in the subculture of women and that women teach abuse. And that's hard. That's a hard pill. That was a secondary find. We teach abuse. And we can talk about that at another time. But I absolutely love what I do. My practice in Michigan was brick and mortar, but with the pandemic, we were going to go virtual anyway, but with the pandemic, it just forced us to do it a year earlier. And I was able to, at that time, I was moving to Florida. So I maintained my practice, which is Need to Talk. But recently, I've joined a practice here in Wesley Chapel called the Tampa Bay Center for Relational Psychology, where I work 1 day a week. And then the other 4, I work here from home. And so that's just a little bit about my story, but I do love people. And the most favorite pastime that I have is laughing.
Love it, love it, love it. We're going to remember that. You got us started off with laughing. Dr. Davis is going to come on and facilitate our discussion on mental health. But thank you for so much for sharing, because you saved her a story. She likes to open with the story. You've given us the best story possible. So listen, buckle up to our radio listening audience, to our viewers, wherever you are. You are about to be empowered. Dr. Davis, take it away.
Good afternoon again. Let me tell you how powerful those introductions were. This whole list of questioning is about to change because you've given us something to speak to. particularly this last story, Dr. Spence. And I'd also like Dr. Dominique to comment on these things as well. So in minority communities, unique variables, just like, what you've mentioned, Dr. Deb, unique variables are in part responsible for the higher rate of mental health prevalence amongst us. Such as a stressful upbringing, being told to hold feelings in, encounters with law enforcement, strong woman syndrome. Hello, Dr. Dominique. Tell us about novel approaches that you use to break through and intervene successfully. Now, Dr. Deb, in that case, you had to physically intervene and your heart was affected. What are some of the methods that you use in the clinic, virtually or live? What are some of those methods that you use to break through those moments?
Well, first, one of the things I think is really important is joining.
Mm.
If a therapist isn't able to join with the person that they're working with, and I don't call them patients, I call them clients. If we're not able to join, we can't go anywhere with them. So I think we need to take the time to let them know that we understand them culturally, we understand their struggles, we understand what they're going through, and that we form an alliance, a team, and the relationship is what drives change. And then we understand some things. I think, sometimes with my practice in Michigan, we had a lot of African-American clients, but we let people know, particularly African-Americans, that we understand the distrust that has been built up with mental health in our community. We understand the historical distrust with the experimentation that went on with us. We understand the current distrust, like with Black males driving and profiling and that issue. But we also understand that at some point in time, there needs to be some type of an educational process and that takes place that we can actually move our clients. And as they see themselves progressing, as they begin to trust you more, then they trust the process. So it's joining, education, similarities. Those are things that I think are just, scratching the surface.
I love that. Dr. Dominique?
No, I echo everything Dr. Deb said. I think the only thing that I'll add in relation to some of, the ancestral work is I like to tell people that, none of these things that we're talking about, none of this methodology and things that we learn in school and things as mental health professionals is really new to us as a people, right? So like the ancestral work that I like to do, I tell people that this is just a rediscovery moment for us. Like everything is already in our unconscious and we're just bringing it up into our conscious awareness. And so by doing so, we are able to really elevate our level of thinking, elevate how we're looking at the world around us in order to see things in a different way. And so like Dr. Deb spoke to, the rapport building and all these sorts of things that happen as a foundational level of therapy, just considering that we already have that power right within us to see the change and do things differently, right? We just have to be empowered to call on that, right? And then to see it manifest for ourselves. So it's a really powerful, I think, and enriching experience for us as the therapist to be able to walk with people along that journey. And to really help them to pull things from themselves, because we're not really giving them anything that they didn't already know. At least that's how I tend to approach it.
I love what you two have mentioned, the richness of it. What I heard in the joining, I didn't know that was a term or a genre or a method called joining. Aligning. In my practice, I call that, meeting patients or clients, where they are. They need education to bring out, what's already in them to help them approach their issue, approach the world, looking at things in a new light. In that vein, I have another question here. It's more than a discussion, is what you've shared. There are interventions like cognitive behavioral therapy or just that realm of interventions for from psychology. Can you tell us about CBT, how you use it in your practice? How do you make the concept of that kind of intervention, um, I guess something that a client wants to engage in? You're giving them exercises to approach their condition. How do you engage or connect a patient with the intervention and essentially encourage them to participate?
Well, cognitive behavioral therapy, and for the listening audience, when you say cognitive, you're thinking about thoughts and how you think. So with cognitive behavioral therapy, the premise is that when we change our thoughts, when we identify unhealthy thoughts and we can make them healthier, then it changes your life. Cognitive behavioral therapy is only one of many therapies. And I think Dr. Blanchette would agree with me that it's just one of many therapies. So when we identify these faulty thinking patterns like polarized or black and white thinking, emotional reasoning, and those type of things, that's a part of cognitive behavioral therapy. We change it. But what we also find is that faulty thinking is at the base of a lot of different issues like substance, depression. So the value that I see in doing that, and by the way, this is only a small piece of the puzzle. When we do therapy, we look, a good therapist will draw from so many different types of therapy. It's like an artwork. It's like instinctual, but that's one of the pieces that we look at. But what we find is that it will help, you can get a big bang for your buck when you look at the cognitive, because it will kind of self-correct many different areas of your life. But there's other things like, relational therapy, existential. I didn't realize growing up that I'm existential. I'm an existentialist. I didn't know that until I went to school and learned it. So wow. There's a lot of different things. There's brief therapy. There's and Dr. Blanchette will talk about her specialty, what she likes the most. I don't want to go there. But there's all kinds of things that a good therapist will draw from, not just one method of therapy. You have to be a scientist and an artist at the same time.
Ooh, I like that. A scientist and an artist.
Yeah. No, I definitely
there's so
agree.
much in that. Yeah, I can't wait.
Unpack that.
Yeah, we'll come back around to that. Go ahead, Dr. Dominique. I'm gonna get some.
No, I mean, I totally and completely agree. I think the thought process and like when people, well, I want to caveat to say that I think this notion of like people having one thought process around what therapy is, right? And this CBT being kind of like the gold standard, so to speak, of what people think of when they think of therapy in general. Like Dr. Deb said, there's so many different options for us to explore and kind of taking a more holistic view, right? And so when we think about all these different types of therapy modalities, and again, these things weren't created necessarily for us or by us. And so we as Black mental health professionals always being willing and able to adapt based on who it is that we're talking to, who it is that we're seeing, what the presentation is, what they're going through. That's super important. But the reframing piece, I think for me is what I take the most from CBT in terms of, if we have the negative thought, like Dr. Deb said, we can reframe that into something else. Where did that negative thought come from and how is it influencing how we feel? And then based on those feelings, how we're acting, right? So kind of mapping out for people that it's a process that's happening, typically unbeknownst to us because things feel like they're happening in a split second, but there's actually like a methodology, right, that's playing out in our brain, and we have the power to kind of put a pin in that, so to speak, when we can reframe our thoughts in the moment and learn how to do that. So I think it's just being mindful of the fact that yes, CBT is great for a lot of reasons, but there's so much more out there. And I always tell people to be open to a more kind of eclectic type of approach. And really know who it is that you're sitting with to be able to figure out what is going to benefit them the most. So
Wow.
May I add, when you come to therapy, and this is what one of my clients explained to me, and I love this. I'm going to borrow this from her. She says, I came at a most vulnerable point in my life. So I had to be very selective at who I allowed to pour into me during that time. So the value that I'm trying to get at is, when you select a therapist, be careful who you let pour into you. And that reframing piece, Dr. Blanchette, wonderful. I usually say to people, can you imagine a gaudy, ugly picture? It's like I wouldn't put that thing on my wall, wouldn't be caught dead with that picture. But if you strip away the gaudy frame, you put a nice matting, sleek new frame, you put the same picture on the wall, and then you say, wow, that's dope. But it's the same picture, it's the same person. Right. It's gotten that facelift that it needed. It was shedding, it shedded all the ugliness. That's how reframing and working with CBT can be.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Dr. Auntie. Thank you, Dr. Dominique. We want to come back and talk about reframing. We also want to talk about the casualness of how, and I love the way you all have named your company, removing some of the stigma right off the top. We're going to be back in a minute. Special thanks to our corporate sponsor, Moffitt Cancer Center. Back in a moment.
Hey, this ain't right. Better known this is clean. You looking for some great barbecue? Come see them two brothers in the grill.
Of COVID-19. Like others with existing health issues, cancer patients are at a high risk due to their compromised condition. If you are newly diagnosed with cancer, your care likely can't wait. Moffitt Cancer Center is the best place for your cancer concerns and to provide guidance to help you plan your next steps. We're here for you. Call 1-888-456-2839 or go to moffitt.org/here for you.
Who doesn't love being number one? When your team's dominating the standings or your favorite band rocks the charts at number one, it feels good, right? Kind of like how it feels when you have auto insurance with State Farm. Because making you feel like number one is an honor your local State Farm agent takes seriously. Through the good times and not so good, your State Farm agent's proud to be here to help life go right.
Call Herman White at 961-6661. That's 961-6661.
You've been injured. You deserve help from an attorney that knows how to handle your injury claim. This is Attorney Clinton Paris from the Law Office of Clinton Paris. For over a decade, I worked for insurance companies, and now I use that knowledge and experience to help people that have been injured. For a free consultation, call me, Attorney Clinton Paris, at 813-413-7924. That's 813-413-7924, or at parislawoffice.com. At the Law Office of Clinton Paris, we take the pain out of being hurt. Offices, Riverview.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Business with Show. You know, this is the second hour of our show, and I am here. The doc is in the house, but today, 3 docs are in the house. We are just so fortunate. Welcome back to the show again. Please like and share this post. You all are hearing some exceptional information coming from these 2 experts. And I must say to you, Dr. Dom, to you, Dr. Auntie, first of all, you guys have to come back and tell us about your company's names, how you came up with the names, because I think that is so important. If I had to go and make an appointment with Dr. Dominique Blanchette, and yet I found out that this was Dr. Dom, or if I had to make an appointment with Dr. Deborah Spence, and I found out that this is Dr. Auntie, I'm like, book my appointment. I'm already relaxed. And sure, we wanted to come back and talk to you about your motivation towards mental health, but you've already shared that with us. We wanted to hear more about your advocacy for what it is that you're doing, and you've already shared that with us. But let's just a little bit. How important is it in the name of your company in reaching specifically culturally to your clients or with your clients? And I'll start with you, Dr. Auntie.
It's extremely important. You know, I'm from a family of storytellers. When I was young, my parents would go to parent-teacher conference, and the teacher would say, "Oh, she's a nice student. She's a good student. Just one problem." And my mother would say, "She talks too much." And the teacher would agree, "Yeah, she talks too much." So, and I remember my father saying, "I'll give you this 50-cent piece if you can be quiet for 15 minutes. I can never get it. I never got it. So I had a need to talk. And people always say, you know, I really need to talk. And so that's how it just came up organically, you know, need to talk. And so, and I'm sorry, what was the other part of your question?
Well, do your name of your company and just the fact that you're Dr. Auntie.
Yeah. Oh, Dr. Auntie. Yes. You know, so many of my female clients would say, and male clients, you know, you're like an auntie to me. You're like,
Right.
and it just stuck. So I trademarked the name, Dr.
Yes, you
Auntie.
did. Yes, you did. And I love it. I love it. And that just allows me to be able to come because you both did it. So Dr. Dom, in some instances in your writings, I've seen Dr. Dominique. To you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, again, talking about that joining that Dr. Auntie mentioned, like we are still just people, right? We're therapists, we're all the things professionally, but we're still just who we are, right? We talked about our moms in the beginning.
Yes.
That's who I am. I'm Dom. That's what my mom calls me. And yeah, we can tack the doctor on it, but I'm still Dom. So I think it's about the authenticity piece too, of knowing that, you know, we know where we came from, right? And where we're trying to go. And that's the journey of healing also, right? We have to recognize where do we come from? Where are we trying to go? So I think it's just the connection piece and the comfortability that you spoke to, Miss Sherryl, about when people see this, they know like, oh, like this is for us. You know what I mean? And that us is very specific. And that's the goal. I think with the Black Girl Doctor, our founder, Dr. Ty, like she knew that, and that's why she named the organization what she named it. But that was very intentional, I think, on her part also, to allow all of us to have the opportunity to decide what it is that we wanted to be called. Right. So I could have gone by Dr. Blanchett if I really wanted to, but you know, it's like, well, that's actually my dad. Right? Like that's what people call him. It's like, that's not me. Like I'm
love it.
Dom. So
I love it. And listen, you guys, at the ending of the show, you really got us deep into the whole cognitive behavioral therapy, or as you call it, CBT. But now we're going to get to the second part of this very therapeutic conversation with Dr. Davis. Dr. Davis, my special request, can we just book a conference, a brunch with these ladies, and they can invite some of their colleagues, because there are a lot of us that are, and this is one of Dr. Auntie Doctor's terms, booked and busy. And then you've got, oh my gosh, then you came in with the importance of life and leadership. Dr. Dom, listen, y'all set it up. Back to you, Dr. Davis.
Okay. So we've unpacked a tremendous amount in the first half of the show. I can honestly say these professionals, Sherryl, they are so rich in their knowledge in terms of how deep we can go in terms of or our impression of what we get out of therapy. Let me see in my notes here, relational, existential, grief therapy, and I'm certain that there are other types of therapy. How does one go about selecting the right therapist? Dr. Deb, you mentioned earlier, we have to take care in who we select. because of how, I guess, they frame things and where we end up in that frame. Are we outside of that frame? Do we get from therapy what we need to get out of therapy? How does one go about selecting the right therapist? Because to be quite honest, I've learned today. I've learned. So how do we go about selecting that right therapist?
I believe that you interview your therapist. I do. I believe that you should start with an initial consultation and see if there's a good fit. Now, the thing about therapy is like, there's a wide range of services. First of all, I just want to say that. So no matter what your social economic status is, where you come from or whatever, there should be some therapists available to you. So there's state generated therapy sessions along the spectrum to private therapists. So I just want to say that. So I don't want anybody to think that it's beyond them or out of their reach.
Yes.
So you interview, you know what you want. Don't be afraid to ask, what do you think about therapy? What's your method of therapy? And research it. Research before you ask, and research after you speak to someone. Take your time. Sometimes you just need a therapist who knows certain things without it having to be said. In the African American community, I get calls all the time, and people say, I'm not trying to be funny or anything, but are you an African American? Right. And I say, all of my therapists are African American, but whether they are or not, they need to be able to relate.
Yes.
They need to be able to understand certain nuances, privilege, the historical effects that slavery has had on us and our behavior and our social learning. So ask questions, decide, this is what I want. There's all kinds of things, motivational interviewing. Maybe if you're highly resistant or you have substance issues, there's EFIT, emotional focused therapy. If there's some deep trauma, find out what you need and then go get it. It's like you're shopping for a dress, girl. What's the occasion? How do you want to look? And then when you go on that search, when you see it, you know it. So when you hear and talk to that person, you should be able to click.
Mm-hmm.
Click.
Yeah, that's it. I was just gonna say like facts. That's it.
So in looking for your click, let me circle back around to the online counseling. So we're not always available to go in person. And as you mentioned, both of you have, hybrid practices. And most of your clients, Dr. Dominique, are online. Is there a time where you should refer a patient or a client to an in-person therapist?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends on a couple of things. First, I think, to Dr. Deb's point about asking questions, like the level of competence of the therapist, they should always know where they stand in terms of what they're comfortable with, what types of presentations and things that they feel comfortable seeing, especially we're talking virtual. I know for me personally, given that I did a lot of severe mental illness related work prior to, so like crisis stabilization and suicidality and those sorts of high level of acuity presentations, I know for myself that I would want to see a person who is saying that they are actively, for example, thinking about ending their life. I would want to see that person in person, right? If they're telling me that that's something that is their main concern, then I would probably refer out. So that's just an example of, I think it depends on the therapist's personal comfortability level, and also just the actual presentation. So, substance abuse and things of that nature that might take more of a quick turn, so to speak, where if I'm seeing you virtually and a crisis happens, I can't get to you. Like I don't ever meet any of my clients in person at this point because our practice is completely virtual. So I had to feel comfortable enough to say that I can take you on knowing that. And so I think that's where it falls on therapists to be able to have those conversations with the client. And it's not that we don't want to see you, and it's not that we think there's something wrong with you because you have a presentation that we might feel like is more sustainable in person. It's just that it's our job to make sure that you're safe first and foremost. And so that's where the fit piece comes into play. So that's what I would say.
Dr. Deb, what would you say are some of the pros and cons of using an online therapist?
Oh, when we first started this online thing, I was exhausted because you have to look so hard, and if in person you can see the defensiveness, but online you have to look so hard. But I think that COVID has forced us to make this an art form, and it is working. One of the things is that it saves on resources, time, travel. It saves with convenience. You don't have to take an hour out of your day to travel to see a therapist, to travel away, back home from seeing a therapist. It's just definitely more convenient. You still get the same confidentiality. You don't have to be seen going into a counseling service if that's what's with one of your concerns. You can do it from the convenience of your own home. It's the same effectiveness. It's less intimidating for you to sit in your home and talk to somebody than to sit in a strange office and a strange environment initially. So, I think it's wonderful. And I think, again, as Dr. Cusseaux said, that was one of the best things that came out of COVID. And I do agree with you. And so I love it. And I do also agree with Dr. Blanchette that it depends on the severity of the case. First of all, when we practice within our wheelhouse, so to speak, the things that we have mastered, the things that we are good at. And when someone comes and approaches you, and it's not a particular issue or topic that's not in your wheelhouse, we will refer out. It's the ethical thing to do, is to refer out. And again, it's not because we don't like you or don't click. We should always take clients that we think that we can help, and that our experience says that we can help. So yes, sometimes we do refer out to the more severe cases, or to cases that may have some things that aren't necessarily steeped in reality. That's one of the things that I thought about. So how can you tell? There's so many visual cues in that. And if you can't get to that person, as Dr. Blanchette says, then I think you do them a disservice. So that's what I think.
I think you two are maybe some of the best therapists that I've spoken to in terms of the depth of your knowledge, the decision to refer, knowing what's in your wheelhouse. I mean, to the degree that you actually have answered my next question, what's the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist, and then when to refer out, and you've explained that, both of you, very eloquently. Want to move outside of the box, outside of my box. I actually got these ideas from reading both of your bios. I want to talk about this Reiki concept, this energy healing. Also, let me just start there. Reiki. Tell us about Reiki.
Yeah, Reiki. So I will share and disclose, right, that my therapist actually referred me to see a Reiki practitioner early on in our sessions together. And it really was the best thing I feel like that could have happened for me in my own personal journey. So much so that I decided that I wanted to investigate more and ended up getting certified myself. But Reiki is basically, I would say it's just a healing practice that's attempting to return our body to balance, so to speak. So the idea is that we're moving energy through the body, right, through our different chakras and different parts of our body. But the actual practitioner is just a vessel, really, by which the energy is moving. So think of it as like you're going in to get a massage, so to speak, right? So, but you're fully clothed, right? You're laying on a massage table and the practitioner is there, and we're moving that energy based on what we feel, right, as the vessel in the moment, right? So most of our traumas and things are trapped in our body. So there's the release that can happen by just moving that energy through. And it's a shifting, it's a release. You can feel a push, you can feel a pull, you can feel a tense, like you feel hot and cold temperatures. There's all different things that can happen. And based on the type of practitioner that you're seeing, right, you might get some other little gems along the way. But similar to like with a therapist, you have to do your research and know kind of what it is that you're getting into, because there are different levels to it. Right. So there are Reiki masters, right? And there are folks like me who I have 2 certifications and I'm a Reiki practitioner. So it's really at the core, I think, just getting a sense of where am I holding on to things that may not be serving me? How can I release that in an energetic sense? So yeah, it's a really, I think, freeing practice to experience. And I tell people, even if you're walking in feeling like I have no idea what I'm getting into, afterwards, you probably will just feel like you got a massage, right? Of like, oh, I just feel relaxed and I'm not really sure why. I mean, to me, that's kind of good enough, because sometimes we just, need a little reset. But yeah, so again, that energy shift is the key to it. But also, like I mentioned earlier, like a different level of awareness, I think, can happen as well. And that we begin to operate, right, on a different kind of spiritual plane, even an energetic plane. So you might be left feeling like, I still don't really know what that is that you just said, but just think of it as balance. That's the key.
I actually think you did a eloquent, took a very eloquent approach to explaining the connection between mental health progression to wellness and the physical benefits of such a practice. So given that, I'm going to ask Dr. Deb about how the same may occur with affirmations and meditation. How can you use the uplifting half or the growth component of mental health care and therapy to benefit the physical?
I'm glad you asked, because there's a direct connection between mental health and your physical body. Mental health, in my personal opinion and my professional opinion, is as common as the common cold. What do you think? What do I mean by that? Well, there's not a day in our lives that we don't have a mental health issue or we're dealing with our mental health. There's a direct connection between our mental health and illness, whether it's diabetes, heart disease, stress, even in the adult life. What we're learning too is that even in a child's life, their mental health is affected by what we call adverse child reactions, experiences, and adverse child experiences. So, for example, the amount of moves that we make, the trauma that we see in a household, there's several different types of things that can happen. Death, they all manifest physically later on in life. So, there's about 78% of illnesses can start with mental health issues. And when these things happen, they can cut off as much as 20 years of your life expectancy. So there's a direct connection. Talk about stress and the connection that it has to cancer. It's there. And I'm so excited that the medical community is now linking the two, mental health and physical health. And now they're beginning to see the value of good mental wellness. We take better care of our cars than we do our mental health. We take our cars in for oil changes, tire rotations. How many times a year? 4 or 5, maybe 6 times a year. How many times do we take our brains and our heart and our emotions in for a check? We don't. So this is something that we need to do. So recognize that there's a direct link between what we think, what we've experienced, and our well-being, our quality of life, and our demise.
I think that this has been one of the richest experiences that we've had on this LTV show, and we're definitely going to have you back. So from what I've gleaned today, some of what I've gleaned today is it's very important that you're well matched with your therapist, and not every therapist is a good fit for you. You need a strong therapist, one that understands you and can connect with your needs. Albeit a motivational session, a relational type of therapy, an existential, and I still need to know what that is, an existential therapy session, and certainly a grief session. We need to make sure that our therapist is right for us to, as Dr. Dominique said, bring forward the good of what's inside of us. We may not always know what it is inside of us that can be brought to a positive light, but a therapist can help with that. So in these last few minutes, give us some final thoughts on how we can be proactive. We can use the things that we've learned today to take a more proactive approach to seeking mental health care.
I would say, let's throw the stigma of mental health out the window. We don't need it. It's garbage. I know we grew up in homes that said what happens in this house stays in this house. And we grew up in communities that we thought somebody was a little off, and we all know what that meant. But let's just say they were hurting, or there's something terrible that happened to them. You know, we need to take care of ourselves. And taking care of ourselves doesn't mean a Louis Vuitton bag. It doesn't necessarily mean going out on Friday night. Taking care of yourself means being still, understanding how you think, understanding the relationship between your mind and your body. Taking care of yourself means knowing when you've had too much and being able to take a step back. Taking care of yourself means being the best person that you can be. Existentially, it's about, what's my purpose in life? What's my itch? I need to get to that. What's the meaning of life? Who am I and why am I here? You know? And so as a therapist, we help you get there. We help you answer some of the questions. We help you understand your spiritual gift clusters. Even if I incorporate the spiritual counseling into my counseling, I do some spiritual counseling if you want that. I meet you where you are. And so, what is that? I believe that the adverse things that happen in our lives are simply growth opportunities. And they're opportunities to form tools that will help other people and glorify why you're here and who made you.
There you go. Who made you?
Yes.
Dr. Dominique.
Just that feel as Black folks that we always need to be pouring from our overflow, not pouring from full, because our society is not made for us to be fully thriving at all times. And there are things coming at us from all directions at any given day. And so we have to be really intentional about filling our cup and then some. So that's why I say pour from overflow. And one really great way, I think, to get to that point is to have somebody also pouring back into us via therapy, via communication, with a support system, accountability partners, and people who want to see us thrive and succeed. So just think of your therapist as the GPS to your car. You have all the tools and you have to decide which road you're going to drive on, and they are just there to kind of offer you different routes to go. So that power that I mentioned, I will plug that again. It's all in here, and we just have to find the person that is going to help us to bring that out. So yes, to decrease the stigma and find your therapist. The hardest part is just starting the process, is showing up for the first meeting. So deciding that you want to get help and to talk to somebody is a win in and of itself. So I encourage everybody. It doesn't mean that you have a problem. It just means that you have self-awareness. So
Sherryl.
Wow, I'm just speechless here. 3 phenomenal women. Maya Angelou would be proud of you all. Phenomenal woman. That's you. Thank you, Dr. Auntie, Dr. Deborah Spence. Thank you, Dr. Dom, Dr. Dominique Blanchett. You all have provided us with a wealth of information. And the key is going to be, what are we, to our radio listening audience? Thank you for tuning in. Here is a perfect opportunity. Find your match. Click. Live your best life. I am looking forward to a part 2. We're going to, in our thank you post, share your information. If there's something else you need us to share, please email me and our administrators will share that with you. This was the quickest hour I think we've ever had on the show, Let's Talk Business. What you all have provided for us in this short segment, life-changing. Life-changing. And to be able to see 2 beautiful women of color representing us, kudos to you, kudos to your family, kudos to all that you had to go through to bring yourselves, to bring your message to us, to our radio listening audience. And I challenge our radio listening audience to like, share, tag, repost, so that this message permeates throughout our community, I'm so proud of you, you young ladies. I'm almost rendered speechless. And Dr. Davis and I just came off of a huge, really 10-week campaign with the American Heart Association, just driving home the importance of African-American women with stroke and heart disease. And I'm so glad that 1 total week of this campaign was on mental health. And they invited the great Olympian Gabby Douglas to come and talk to us. So for you all to continue this conversation, let us know what we can do to support you further. Please let us know when you have an event coming up. I look forward to meeting you both. For this, I say thank you. I think for the first time in over 4 years, I do not want to say, but I have to. This show is a wrap. Thank you.
thank you.
Somebody else pushed it.
Thank you for having us.